He was looking for some answers. God knowed he had searched. Trading in his old life, grace is just a step ahead. When he made it to the altar, he turned to me and said, friend, I've hit rock bottom. Not a nickel to my name. I threw away what God gave me. I have only me to blame. Every day is a battle. When your heart is incomplete, help me get down on my knees so I can get back on my feet. He was so tired of running, a man without a home. This world cannot help you when you're empty and all alone. He said, I want my family back. I'm tired of living in the street. Help me get down on my knees so I can get back on my feet. Friend, I've hit rock bottom. Not a nickel to my name. I threw away what God gave me. I have only me to blame. Every day is a battle. When your heart is incomplete, help me get down on my knees so I can get back on my feet. Every day is a battle. When your heart is incomplete, help me get down on my knees so I can get back on my feet. Help me get down on my knees so I can get back on my feet.
Thankful to have Jared with us tonight. It's always good to see your face when I walk in here. Been praying for you. Want the Lord's will for you, and I know you do too. So we'll trust him every step of the way, won't we? 2 Corinthians chapter 9. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, and we'll probably read verse 8 as well. How many of you all enjoyed Bob Legg's message Sunday night? Oh, yeah, I did too. I've been feeding on that. And I think I looked online. I think he preached for almost an hour. Now, it didn't feel like it was quite that long. Now, maybe you thought it did, but I didn't think it felt quite that long. It was good. He said a lot of things that stuck with me, but one thing in particular he said that kind of went along with what I'd been thinking about. I can't remember the exact words that he said, but it was sort of along the lines of, you're not just supposed to live like a Christian, you're supposed to like it.
Yeah.
I like being a Christian. Do you like being a Christian? I'm telling you what, it's the best life there is. In fact, it's really the only life there is. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. He is the creator and the sustainer of all. We wouldn't have life but for him. So living life in him is really the only way to live life. I like being a Christian.
Amen.
And attitude still matters to God. Attitude matters. Intent comes before content. God knows not just the content of your heart, He knows the intent of your heart and of your thoughts. Yeah. That was one of Christ's primary messages to the Pharisees. You know, the Pharisees loved to give lip service to God. They loved to do everything right on the outside, but Jesus told them that their hearts were far from God. They hadn't got their attitude taken care of. God doesn't just want your content to be right, He also wants your intent to be right. He wants to clean up your inside, and once your inside is cleaned up, then that'll clean up your outside as well. He doesn't just want you to live life for Him. He wants you to like living life for Him. 2 Corinthians 9, 6, and 7. But this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. And that is a law, by the way. There is no exceptions to that. Amen. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart. Think about that, your heart, the intent of your heart. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give. Not grudgingly or of necessity. So not with a bad attitude and not because you have to. Yeah. For God loveth a what? Cheerful giver. God doesn't just want what you have to give. He wants what you have to give, and He wants you to do it cheerfully. You know what that word cheerful is? You go back to the Greek, it's actually the Greek word hilaros. It's where we get our English word hilarious. God loves a hilarious giver. He loves somebody that will give for Him cheerfully, amen, out of the right motive, out of the right intent of the heart. Now, we don't always like to do that, though, do we? We don't always think that that's possible, to give cheerfully, to live cheerfully. But I'll tell you, it is always possible. Why is it always possible? Look at verse number 8. And God is able. You may not be able in and of yourself, but God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that ye always, having all sufficiency in all things, may abound to every good work. It's always possible for you to be a cheerful giver because God's grace is always sufficient for you to be so. Faithful is He that calleth you, who will also do it. God wants you to be cheerfully giving. He wants you to be cheerfully sowing the seed, as He talks about here, not sparingly, but bountifully, because He wants you to reap bountifully what you have sown. He wants you to work in His field, but again, He doesn't just want you to work in His field. He wants you to whistle while you're working. He wants you to be happy about working in His field. Yeah. And in light of everything that God has done for you, it's just your reasonable service to be cheerful. Amen. He says, don't give grudgingly. Don't have a bad attitude about it. Yeah. Don't give out of necessity or compulsion. Don't give because God has commanded you to give, and that's just the command, so I'm just going to do it. That's the wrong attitude too. Cheerfully. Cheerfully, with the right intent and the right motive of the heart. Because if you sow with the wrong attitude and you sow sparingly, you're going to reap sparingly, and God is not going to bless that kind of an attitude. So let's give cheerfully from our heart. Let me mention a few things about that. Number one, we need to be willing to give of our resources. And I'm going to mention three things here. We need to be able to give of our resources cheerfully. Number one, and this is the first one that you probably all think of when you think of being a cheerful giver. You think of your financial resources, and that absolutely does apply to your finances. Amen. Now, I'm going to confess to you tonight, I know none of you have probably ever thought this, but I'm going to tell you, just speaking as a man, just speaking as living in the flesh, right? When I sit down to write my tithing check on occasion, I'll look at that check and I think, how many of these have I written? Over the years, how many of these checks have I written? Well, that'd be a lot of money over the years, wouldn't it? Boy, what if I'd have saved that somewhere? Wonder how much that would have been worth today. I'm just speaking as a man. I'm thinking of how this flesh thinks, right? But then my spirit rises up within me, and the Holy Spirit checks me on that. Says, Alan, that ain't yours to begin with. You don't own that. God owns that. It all belongs to Him. Amen. And you want to know how much it could be worth today? It's worth infinitely more in the hands of God than if you'd have kept it in your hands. Think of what that has done for man. Think of what God can do. Think of the souls that may have been saved because of that little bit that has been contributed, and not just for me, but from you as well. God can do so much. No matter how much you have to give to Him, that's not the point. It's your attitude about it. He wants a cheerful giver. And yes, He wants you to cheerfully sit down and write that tithing check that you're supposed to write, because that's the least that you can do for the God who has given you everything that you have. Let Him control it. We like to have control of things, though, don't we? Let Him control it. I think of the widow that put in her 2 mites. It's the last thing that she had. But she said, God, I'm going to give you the last thing that I have. And I'm not going to do it grudgingly. I'm not going to do it out of necessity. I'm going to do it, Lord, because I love you. I'm going to do it cheerfully with the right motive. And God blessed her that day. It wasn't the amount that she had to put in, and it's never about that. Remember, intent before content. God doesn't want your content until He has your intent. Get that right. Give of your resources. Give of your finances. Give of your talent also. That's another resource that you have, is your talent. And I'm talking about the natural talent that you have. I'm also talking about the spiritual gifts that God has given to each and every believer. We have a lot of natural talent here. We have a lot of people that can sing in this church. We have a lot of people that can play instruments in this church. And it's wonderful. You should be using that natural, God-given ability cheerfully for the Lord. But even if you don't have much of that natural ability, if you are a Christian, you have spiritual abilities. God has given abundantly to His church the gifts of the Spirit, and you are included in that as a child of God. That means He's given you something that you can give back to Him cheerfully. Maybe you have the gift of wisdom. We have a lot of men and women of God in our congregation that have been given the gift of great wisdom. And I'm thankful over the years for those who have been willing to share that gift of wisdom with me and with others. Yeah. You need to use those gifts. You need to use them cheerfully. Yeah. Perhaps you have the gift of preaching. You need to preach. Yeah. Brother Jared, we need to preach cheerfully. Not grudgingly, not out of necessity, but we need to preach, and we need to like preaching. Yeah. Amen. Need to not begrudge the fact that God has called us to the greatest work in the world, and that is sowing the seed of His Word, and we need to sow as much as we can of it. I appreciate every opportunity that I get to stand behind the sacred desk and proclaim the Word of the Lord. Perhaps you are a prayer warrior. We've had some prayer warriors at Bloom over the years too. Yeah. They have given of their time. They've given of themselves to pray with and for others. Need to be willing to do that cheerfully. We'll reap bountiful rewards when we do. Amen. And let me say this to you. And I'll say this to you as one of your pastors. Now, I might come and tap you on the shoulder and ask you to do something. But don't wait for someone to come up and tap you on the shoulder and ask you to do something. Don't wait for the Lord to chastise you or kick you in the rear end to get you to move. Cheerfully give of your talent unto the Lord, not as unto men. Don't do it for me. Don't do it for Kenny. Don't do it for anybody else. Do it for the Lord. Cheerfully. He'll bless you for it. Those resources that he's given you are to be used for his glory. Your finances, your talent, and probably one of the most precious gifts that you have is the gift of your time. Paul told the Ephesians that we need to redeem the time, for the days are evil. What does that mean, to redeem the time? That means don't waste it. That means take it back. Control your time. Don't let your time control you, right? Plan your day. Don't let your day plan you. Take charge of it. Don't just spend your time. Invest your time. There's an epidemic today. I read about it the other day in the news. Teenagers today spend on average 7 hours every day in front of a screen. And that does not count the time that they are doing schoolwork. 7 hours a day in front of a screen. That is an epidemic, Andy. You can't live life in front of a screen. Most of the time, you are wasting your time in front of a screen. Now, unless you're doing work, but again, that survey, that did not count schoolwork or any kind of other work that they were doing. That was basically entertainment time spent in front of a screen. That ain't going to pay dividends in the long run, and we've just begun to see what kind of an effect that's going to have on our society going forward. Redeem that time. Parents, if you've got kids, and I've got 2 of them, and they love their iPads, I'm telling you, they can go to town on those iPads. And we always try to have educational things for them to do on those iPads. But let me tell you, you also need to get in front of your kids. You need to talk to your kids. You need to sit down at the dinner table and have dinner with your kids. You need to be investing your time in your family. And you need to be teaching them to invest their time and to use their time and to give of their time wisely to those things that are going to reap eternal rewards. Give of your resources cheerfully. But then also, we can't just talk about our resources. That's generally where we go to when we think about being a cheerful giver. We go to our resources. But you know what? If we just go to our resources, that's still superficial. What God really wants is you. Not a fourth of you, or a half of you, or 3/4 of you, or most of you. He wants all of you. So second of all, tonight, we need to give cheerfully all of ourselves. Now, it's the hardest thing to do sometimes. Because we love self. But listen to the last stanza of the wonderful old hymn that Isaac Watts wrote, "When I Survey the Wondrous Cross." He put it right where it needs to be put. Hit the nail right on the head. He said, "Were the whole realm of nature mine, that were a present far too small. Love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all." When you look at that cross and you see what Jesus did for you, he didn't go to that cross grudgingly, Brother Kenny. He didn't go to that cross of necessity, even though he knew it was the will of God for his life. He went to that cross, dare I say, cheerfully. He went to that cross. Yes, he had sorrow. Yes, he had pain. Yes, he was acquainted with grief, but he knew that to fulfill the will of the Father, That is exactly what he wanted to do because he had the desire in his heart to give himself for you and for me to secure the plan of salvation once and for all mankind. Christianity is Christ. And Christ was willing to lay down his very life to save us. So then, how can we give any less than our all to him? Yes, that means we present our bodies as a living sacrifice. You know what goes along with that? Everything you see and everything you don't see. Your body, your soul, your spirit, the immaterial and the material, all of it's presented to God as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto him, which is just your reasonable service. Amen. When you balance on the eternal scale what God has done for you, you could never outgive him. Amen. It goes to the heart. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, verse 7 said, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity. Maybe you found yourself saying from time to time, oh my, I have to go to church today. It's a Wednesday night. I have to go to church because they'll think something's wrong with me. They'll think I've backslid if I'm not there. I got to go to Sunday school. They'll think something's wrong with me. Got to give my tithe. They'll notice my tithe's not there if I don't give my tithe. I got to put on a smile because they'll think something's wrong. I guess I got to do something for the Lord, but I'd really just rather sit back. But if I do something, I really want to be recognized for it. Well, let me say to you what I said at the outset. We're supposed to live like a Christian, but we're supposed to like living like a Christian. And God doesn't want your content until he has your intent. He doesn't love a giver. Think about it. He doesn't love a giver. He loves a cheerful giver. What kind of giver are you? Stand with me tonight.